So let's just get straight into it. Apparently, Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3 will be having a much smaller roster compared to Xenoverse 2. Let's get into the interview that recently came out with the producer of Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3. Straight into the roster stuff, we have to look at the full context of everything and what the producer himself, not the interviewer, has really said. So apparently during a one-to-one interview, the producer Hirano-san, he made it clear that the team is aware of the situation. Xenoverse 2 wasn't some forgotten middle entry that could be easily replaced. It became the foundation for the community. Xenoverse 2 had 10 years of lifespan, which is very amazing. Hirano said, obviously, we're very excited. But I've also been thinking about what a new experience might look like. So essentially, he's just basically saying, okay, we want to redo things from scratch or whatever, which isn't necessarily the problem, but when you read through, something just doesn't feel off. Something just doesn't feel right. For Hirano-san, the answer starts looking with a different part of Dragon Ball's world. Age 1000 is a new interpretation of a point of the Dragon Ball timeline previously explored. Instead of running through the usual stuff, you're moving forward into the future. It's a more focused corner of Dragon Ball. Yeah, but the problem is we don't know why we should really care about this right now. We don't really know the reason for this, and that's kind of like the issue you're showing. For Xenoverse 2, you had the actual, you had like the stakes and you had the villains and you had the time travel aspect from the past. Why should players care about the future aspect of Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3 right now? That's your job as the producers of the company to show that. This article goes into kind of like pretty much explaining why we shouldn't keep expecting going through the same stuff, which is typical stuff. But it says, Hirano-san explained that Toriyama and the team had created a completely different world setting and lore for this part of Dragon Ball. Bringing that material back for Xenoverse 3 wasn't presented like a random pull from the archive. It sounds more like the team saw an opportunity to give the sequel a different foundation at a time when the series needs one. But who said the series needs one? I'm so confused. So I thought this is the right timing to bring back the conversation into Xenoverse, to bring that back into the conversation. Now let's get into the meat of these things. Let me read the full thing. Of course, Xenoverse fans aren't exactly shy about what they want, and this is where the sequel has to be careful. Players are going to care about the roster, customization, and the years of content that they've already invested in Xenoverse 2 for a lot of them, because this series isn't something they casually reset. No one wants to hear New Era and then decide that everything they love now has to be slowly resold or reintroduced over another decade. Yes, correct. Hirano-san seemed aware of the explanation and said the team knows fans love the large number of characters in the Xenoverse games. However, he also confirmed Xenoverse 3 isn't being built on the same foundation as the first two entries. This is such an excuse because sequels are supposed to build on it. So then why call this Xenoverse 3? Call it something else. All right, but then he says, Xenoverse 1 and 2 shared the same core engine, but with 3, we rebuilt the same engine in order to develop the game. Oh my god. A rebuilt engine sounds exciting and scary at the same time because it suggests Xenoverse 3 is more than an expression dressed up as a sequel, but also means the team can't casually carry everything moving forward without work. Hirano said getting all the characters into the new game will be a challenge, though he also noted the team has redesigned a lot of game mechanics as part of the process. Okay, so this is bullshit. This is absolute bullshit because this game is called Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3 and you've been promoting it as Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3. Sequels are supposed to generally build on top of the previous ones. If you're using first of all, for example, a game like Sparking Zero, oh my god, I can't even believe I'm mentioning that in this conversation, still managed to get a very large portion of the characters. Yes, it didn't get everything from Tenkaichi 3, but quite frankly, it still had a large roster. And that was essentially, all right, whatever the case, whether you think Sparking Zero was a reboot or a sequel, I guess it was a sequel, but the point is, they still try to make it their promotional thing to where they're like, okay, we're going to include a bunch of characters. And there was a bit of an excuse because you can see that they had like Xenoverse 2, not Xenoverse 2, but they had Dragon Ball Super, and then they had to have all the timelines and all that for Dragon Ball. With this, it's like you're redesigning the game, but why? You're redesigning the actual gameplay when there was never anything officially bad with the core gameplay. And now you're trying to use, you know what's the funny thing? I think that, in my viewpoint, I think they're using it as an excuse to sell you more DLC. Have an excuse to redo the gameplay system, which, quite frankly, it seems like they're doing it, which doesn't make sense to me, but more importantly, use that as an excuse, a new game as an excuse, the fact that it's on the PS5 to say, you know what? Oh yeah, we're gonna reduce our roster by probably a significant portion. But don't worry guys, we have a bunch of goodies like being able to sell you GT characters as DLC or certain Dragon Ball Super characters as DLC. We know that the Moro arc and all those arcs aren't gonna come out in anime format for a very long time. So in order for our game to continue lasting, we are going to drain your wallet. That's what this is. And people don't see it because what's going to happen is people are just going to defend this game to the death. And then these same people are going to be making Xenoverse 3 is trash types of videos, or Xenoverse 3 is a disappointment. When in fact, the actual hints are right here. They are essentially saying that they're not going to bring back all characters from the previous games, which is crazy to me. Like, all right, if you can't bring in Ultra Super Villain Goku Black right now, I understand, but to me, this is bad. This is bad. I don't know why they would. Anyway, let's read the article in case it says any other relevant information. The real test will be whether these redesigned mechanics, if Xenoverse 3 is going to ask fans to move on from a new game that lasted 10 years, it needs to feel like someone looked at the whole thing and actually asked what needs to be changed. A real rebuilt engine doesn't automatically make the game will feel better, and fans probably shouldn't assume. Yeah, that's true. The real test will be whether those redesigned mechanics still understand what made Xenoverse work in the first place. This series has never lived or died purely on the sharpness of combat. It's about the full fantasy of making your character, picking your race, building a moveset. All right, let's look at anything if they revealed any other information. There's a reason that Ginyu Force came up in an interview. When asked which Dragon Ball character he personally enjoys, he pointed to the Ginyu Force. All right. He also mentioned that Xenoverse 3 includes elements that lets players explore and customize that level of action performance on screen. Compared to the bigger discussion around Age 1000 and the rebuilt engine, this might sound like a small detail, but I don't think it is. Xenoverse is at its best when Dragon Ball isn't about power levels and cool blasts. It's about style, attitude, comedy, and a specific kind of nonsense that makes people gather in the hub and start doing, Hirano seems to understand that side of the series where people are group prosing all that. He described Xenoverse as something developers and players explore together and elevate together, which fits an online game built around long-term support. Adding more characters to a list is part of that, sure, but keeping players around for years requires something else. Yes, like milking us for DLC. Of course. They need enough reasons to stay, mess around, and feel like the world is changing with them. There's no way to talk about the secret without talking about Akira Toriyama's influence. Absolutely, there's a lot of responsibility and pressure. We want to deliver the best we can. He explained that Toriyama had given a lot of support to his side of Dragon Ball over the years. More importantly, for Xenoverse 3, he left behind what Hirano described as amazing documentation. Apparently, a lot of information about the plot to even it out, as well as the setting, the world lore, and the designs. And apparently, there's a bunch of this text, and you can read it if you want, or you can pause it, but the key thing for this new article is Xenoverse 3 isn't trying to be Fighters, Kakarot, or Sparking Zero. I sure hope not. It has its own lane, and honestly, it needs to stay there. The custom characters, and But anyway, the problem is that when you're here and you hear like redesigned gameplay mechanics and you can't bring everything from the story, this just sounds like a complete excuse where you could potentially make things even worse than Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 from a gameplay perspective because you're redesigning it instead of saying just like building on what works. But for the character roster, this could mean no Beast Gohan, it could be no Orange Piccolo, it could be no GT for now, it could be no Daima, because if a part of your promotion thing is, okay, we're redesigning and we're introducing a lot, and we're trying to make this game last, part of the things that make games last is constant DLC. Xenoverse 2 has a decent sized roster especially after 10 years. The only way I feel like this could potentially be a positive thing would be if they decided to include story mode or story DLC scenarios on top of new characters, the characters that got cut. But it's like we're kind of regressing here because this game is, people expected Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3 to be a full-on sequel. So then why have the Xenoverse 3 name? Like, this is what marketing is like. This is what scumbag marketing is like. Probably even way worse than clickbait, because this is actually affecting your money. This is actually affecting, you purchasing stuff. So I don't know. I'm very frustrated. It won't be as bad if they still have like a majority of the characters and it's just the ultra super villain exclusive characters in Xenoverse 2 that they can add in later. But to me, this essentially says that, okay, we're gonna redesign stuff, but GT characters, Diamond characters, certain super characters may not be in. But we can add that as DLC and we can include story scenarios to make this game last. And it's I don't know.